At my sister's housewarming party, my dad backhanded me in front of 30 people after calling me a barren waste, taking up space and resources that could benefit actual family members. Then they applauded. I smiled and walked out, knowing they had just handed me the ammunition to destroy everything they'd built on my generosity. My name is Claire, and at 32, I've learned that being a financial consultant gives you certain advantages when your family decides to wage war against you. What they didn't know that night was that I held the keys to their entire financial kingdom, and I was about to use every single one. The evening had started innocently enough. My younger sister Maris had just bought her first house with her husband Henry, and they were throwing a celebration. Maris, 29, had always been the golden child despite a string of financial disasters that I'd quietly helped clean up over the years. While I owned my home outright, had built a successful consulting practice, and purchased a beautiful mountain cabin as my retreat, my parents saw my life as worthless because I didn't have children. When I arrived with an expensive bottle of wine and a generous gift card, Maris seemed genuinely happy to see me. I should have recognized the performance. About an hour into the party, she tapped her wine glass for attention and called me over. My parents flanked her immediately, their expressions telling me this wasn't spontaneous. "Claire," Maris began, her voice carrying that artificial sweetness I'd grown to recognize. "You know, money's been tight with the kids and the new mortgage. We've been talking as a family, and we think it would be really generous if you just gave us your vacation cabin. You barely use it, and we could make real family memories there." The phrasing made it sound like a done deal. This was the first I'd heard of it. "You want me to give away my vacation home?" I asked, feeling 30 pairs of eyes boring into me. "It's not like you're using it properly," Dad interjected with that authoritative tone he'd used to silence me my entire life. "Vacation homes are for families. You just go up there alone with that dog." "That dog has a name," I replied, my voice tight. "And yes, I go there to relax and recharge. It's my property that I worked hard to afford." Maris laughed coldly. "Don't be selfish, Claire. Think about my kids, your niece and nephew. They deserve those experiences." That's when Mom's mask slipped entirely. "You don't even have kids," she exclaimed loud enough for everyone to hear. "What do you need a family vacation home for? Stop being so damn selfish." The cruelty stunned me. These people knew I'd been struggling with infertility for years, yet they seemed to take pleasure in throwing it in my face publicly. Dad stepped forward, his face flushed with rage. "Your sister has kids, real responsibilities. You're just a barren waste, taking up space and resources that could benefit actual family members." The words hit me like a physical blow. I'd heard Dad say horrible things before, but never this publicly, never this aggressively. The room shuffled uncomfortably, but nobody defended me. "About time the family disappointment paid up," Maris practically cackled. "Maybe this will finally make you useful for something?" I stood there shaking with rage and humiliation as my own family tore me apart in front of a crowded room. When I managed to say no, that it was my property and I wouldn't give it away, Dad completely lost it. His hand shot up fast, connecting with my cheek in a vicious backhand that sent me stumbling. The sound echoed through the suddenly silent room. And then, to my complete horror, people began clapping. Not everyone, but enough to fill the room with applause. Maris was beaming like she'd won an award. Mom nodded approvingly. Dad straightened his shirt like he'd just completed something important. I stood there, hand pressed to my burning cheek, staring at the people who were supposed to be my family. The betrayal cut deeper than any physical pain ever could. "Fine," I said calmly, my voice deadly quiet. "I'll remember this." The drive home was a blur, but by the time I reached my house and buried my face in Finn's fur, something had shifted. The initial shock was fading, replaced by something much more dangerous. Cold, calculated anger backed by professional expertise. Here's what my family didn't know about their family disappointment. I wasn't just a financial consultant, I was one of the top-earning advisors in the Pacific Northwest, pulling in $180K annually with a client roster that included several Fortune 500 executives. More importantly, I'd been managing our parents' finances for 5 years, ever since Dad asked me to take over when Mom started showing early signs of memory loss. I had power of attorney over their accounts. I handled their taxes, managed their retirement funds, and ensured all their bills were paid automatically. They trusted me completely with their financial lives, and Maris had no idea I was involved in any of it. But I knew everything about theirs. I also knew that I'd been quietly enabling Maris's lifestyle for years. I'd co-signed her first car loan when her credit was shot. I'd lent her money for emergencies more times than I could count, money that was never repaid. I'd even contributed $15,000 toward the down payment on the house we'd just celebrated, though she'd sworn me to secrecy about it. But here's the thing about being a financial consultant. You learn that money equals power, and power can be withdrawn just as easily as it's granted. That night, I sat at my kitchen table with my laptop and began making calls. My professional network wasn't just extensive, it was strategically positioned. Corporate lawyers, tax specialists, elder care advocates, employment attorneys, and regulatory compliance officers. People who owed me favors from years of referrals and successful collaborations. The first call went to Marcus Blackwell, the senior loan officer at Maris's Mortgage Bank. As someone who'd brought them over $2 million in client referrals, I had his direct line. Marcus, I need to discuss my position as co-signer on the Stevens mortgage. There have been some concerning developments involving financial coercion and family abuse. I understand your concerns, Claire. While you can't simply remove yourself as co-signer, you can formally request loan reevaluation based on changed circumstances. Given what you're describing, we'd need to assess whether the primary borrowers can qualify independently. And if they can't requalify, we'd work with them on modifications, but if no suitable arrangement can be reached, the loan could be called due in full. Perfect. My $15,000 contribution and co-signature had been the only reason they'd qualified in the first place. The second call was to resign my power of attorney, but not before conducting a thorough forensic analysis of 5 years of financial records. What I discovered was genuinely disturbing. Dad had been secretly funneling money to Maris for years, money that was supposed to be part of Mom's medical care fund. The loans totaled over $30,000 and were never repaid. Worse, he'd been opening credit accounts in Mom's name without her knowledge, using her deteriorating cognitive state to justify forged applications. I documented everything meticulously. Screenshots, bank statements, credit applications, all obtained legally through my role as their financial power of attorney before resigning. The third call went to Janet Foster at Adult Protective Services. Janet and I had worked together on several elder financial abuse cases for my clients. Janet, I need to report suspected financial elder abuse. I have comprehensive documentation of systematic fund theft from an elderly woman with diagnosed memory issues, including identity theft for unauthorized credit applications. This sounds serious, Claire. Can you send everything over immediately? We'll need to freeze the accounts and launch an investigation. The fourth call was to Patricia Lawson, Maris's supervisor at the small accounting firm where she worked as a bookkeeper. Patricia was actually a former client who'd moved to the company last year. A quick public records check revealed multiple recent judgments against Maris for unpaid debts, information that should have been disclosed due to her role handling company finances. Patricia, I'm not making accusations, but I wanted to ask if you're aware that Maris Stevens has undisclosed financial judgments that could affect her bonding insurance requirements for managing your company's finances. The silence told me everything Patricia hadn't known. The fifth call went to my tax specialist, Robert Hayes, who handled IRS liaison work for my practice. Robert, I need to discuss unreported income. There's documentation of over $30,000 in forgiven loans and gifts that exceed annual thresholds. The recipient appears unaware these constitute taxable events. That's definitely tax evasion if unreported. Send me the documentation and I'll forward it through proper channels. But I wasn't finished. The sixth call was to Child Protective Services, and I want to be absolutely clear. I would never fabricate concerns about child welfare. I didn't need to. Maris's own social media was a treasure trove of concerning posts she'd made public. Photos of the kids in questionable situations, posts about leaving them alone while she went out, comments about using medication to help them sleep so she could have adult time. I simply compiled her own public posts and requested a wellness check. The final call was to David Mitchell, the HR director at Henry's construction company. David was another client who'd specifically mentioned their company's strict policies about domestic violence due to insurance liability and job site safety concerns. The photos I'd taken of my bruised face, combined with witness statements from the few decent people at the party who'd been horrified by Dad's assault, painted a clear picture. I never accused Henry of anything. I simply provided factual information about the family environment and let the company decide whether it met their employment standards. Then I sat back and waited. It didn't take long. 3 days later, Maris called screaming. "What did you do? The bank is calling our loan. They want full payment in 30 days or they're starting foreclosure." I removed myself as co-signer. I explained calmly. "It's my legal right." "You can't do this. We'll lose the house." "You should have thought about that before you decided to publicly humiliate me and demand my property." "Claire, please." Her voice shifted to fake sweetness. "I'm sorry about the party. Things got heated, but you can't punish my kids for this." "The same kids you were so concerned about having vacation memories with, maybe they should ask their grandfather where all their grandmother's medical money went." The line went quiet. "What are you talking about?" Maris asked, but her tone had changed. She knew. Adult Protective Services is very interested in Dad's financial activities. Apparently, stealing from a dementia patient is a serious crime. Who knew? The second domino fell the next day when Dad called. "Claire, we need to talk. There are people asking questions about Mom's accounts." "I'm sure there are. I turned over all financial records to the appropriate authorities." "You had no right." "I had every right. You gave me power of attorney, remember? That means I'm legally obligated to protect Mom's interests. Funny how that works." "Those were family loans." "Those were thefts from a vulnerable adult. The police seemed very interested in the credit cards you opened in Mom's name without her knowledge." The silence stretched long. "What do you want?" he finally asked. "I want you to face the consequences of your actions, just like you made me do at Maris's party." The dominoes continued falling with mathematical precision. Maris lost her job when Patricia discovered not only the hidden financial judgments, but also some creative bookkeeping Maris had been doing to cover her money problems. Borrowing from petty cash with intent to repay later is still theft, even with good intentions. The IRS audit revealed that Maris had failed to report over $40,000 in forgiven loans and gifts over 3 years. The penalties and back taxes were substantial, and wage garnishment began immediately. CPS conducted their wellness check and found conditions concerning enough to require parenting classes and regular check-ins. Nothing that put the kids in immediate danger, but enough to put Maris and Henry under intense scrutiny. Henry lost his job when his company determined his involvement in domestic violence incidents created unacceptable liability exposure. 2 weeks after Henry's termination, I received a call that changed everything. My cousin Nina, Maris's childhood best friend, had been at the party but hadn't participated in the applause. She'd been horrified the entire time. "Claire, I need to tell you something I should have said weeks ago. What happened at Maris's party wasn't spontaneous. They planned it." My blood ran cold. "What do you mean?" I overheard them talking before the party started. Maris said she'd been working on getting your cabin for months. She said you were too selfish to give it up willingly, so they needed to apply family pressure in front of witnesses, so you couldn't back down. The betrayal cut deeper than I'd imagined. They'd orchestrated my ambush. Maris said if they did it publicly, you'd be too embarrassed to say no. She laughed about how you always crumble under public pressure and would probably just hand over the keys to avoid more confrontation. The entire event had been a premeditated attack designed to exploit my perceived weakness. They'd invited 30 people to witness what they expected would be my humiliation and surrender. There's more. After you left, Maris bragged about how she'd been setting you up for months with sob stories about money problems. She said she'd been documenting every time you helped her financially to use as evidence that you always cave when family needs help. Evidence for what? She planned to take you to court if public shaming didn't work. She thought because you'd been supporting her financially for years, you owed it to family to continue. She believed she could convince a judge to order you to sign over the cabin as part of some family support agreement. The audacity was breathtaking. Maris had been building a legal case to steal my property using my own generosity as evidence. Why are you telling me now? Nina was quiet for a moment. Because Maris called yesterday. She's desperate, Claire. She's talking about suing you for intentionally destroying her family. She thinks everything that's happening is because you're vindictive, not because she and your parents broke the law. This was exactly what Maris would do, play victim while refusing to accept responsibility. But now I had advance warning and planned to use it. After hanging up with Nina, I spent the evening conducting deeper reconnaissance of Maris's social media presence. What I found was a goldmine of incriminating evidence that painted a completely different picture from the sob story she'd been telling everyone. While complaining about being broke to me and our parents, she'd been posting pictures of expensive restaurants, new clothes, and weekend getaways. The timestamps showed these posts were from the same periods when she'd been asking me for emergency loans. She'd been lying about her financial situation to manipulate sympathy and extract money from family members. More damaging were posts where she bragged about gaming the system and taking advantage of people who have more money than sense. She'd actually posted screenshots of text messages where she mocked me for being such a sucker for helping her financially. I screenshot everything and compiled a comprehensive file. Then I did something unprecedented for me 6 months ago. I launched my own social media campaign. I posted a detailed account of what happened at Maris's party, complete with photos of my bruised face and statements from the few decent people who'd witnessed the assault. I didn't need to embellish or lie. The truth was damning enough. But I also included Maris's own posts showing her luxurious lifestyle while claiming financial hardship, plus her mocking comments about people who helped her. The post went viral within our social circles. The response was overwhelming. Dozens of people came forward with their own stories of Maris's manipulative behavior, unpaid debts, and history of exploiting family drama to get her way. Several party guests admitted they'd felt uncomfortable but hadn't known how to intervene. More importantly, Maris's current neighbors and Henry's former co-workers began sharing their own experiences. Maris had been borrowing money from neighbors with sob stories about medical emergencies and car troubles, the same stories she'd been telling me. She owed money all over town and had been lying about why. 3 days after my post went live, Maris showed up at my workplace. I was in a client meeting when my assistant knocked on the door. "I'm sorry to interrupt, Miss Blake, but there's a woman here claiming to be your sister. She's quite agitated." Through the glass wall of my office, I could see Maris pacing in the lobby, gesticulating wildly at my receptionist. She looked worse than ever, unkempt, angry, and desperate. I rescheduled my appointment and went to handle the family emergency. Maris started screaming the moment I entered the lobby. "How dare you post that garbage about me online? You're destroying my reputation." "Your reputation destroyed itself. I said quietly, aware my colleagues were watching. I simply shared the truth about what happened. You posted private conversations. That's illegal. I posted conversations you made public on your own social media. Nothing I shared was private. Her face flushed with rage. You're vindictive, and everyone can see it now. Nobody believes you're the victim. The comments on my post suggest otherwise. In fact, quite a few people have reached out to share their own experiences with your behavior. That's when she made a critical error. Maris pulled out her phone and started recording, apparently hoping to catch me saying something she could use against me. Say that again, she demanded, pointing the phone at me. Tell everyone how you systematically destroyed an innocent family because you're a bitter, childless woman who can't stand seeing other people happy. I smiled directly into her camera. I stopped enabling financial abuse and reported criminal activity to the proper authorities. If you want to record this conversation, let's make sure we get the facts straight. I took out my own phone and started recording. Maris, are you denying that you and our parents plan to publicly pressure me into giving you my property? That's not... Are you denying that Dad has been stealing money from Mom's medical fund to give to you? He was helping family. Are you denying that you've been lying about your financial situation while borrowing money from multiple sources? Everyone struggles. Are you denying that you stood by and applauded when Dad assaulted me? Maris's face went white. She'd started recording hoping to catch me saying something incriminating, but instead had created evidence of her own guilt. You can't prove any of that, she said weakly. Actually, I can. I have bank records, social media posts, witness statements, and now this conversation where you haven't denied any of it. She realized she'd walked into a trap. She stopped recording and reached for my phone, but I stepped back. Don't touch me, I said loudly enough for everyone in the lobby to hear. You've already been involved in one assault. I won't give you the opportunity for another. Security arrived then. My assistant had called them when Maris started screaming. As they escorted her out, she turned back for one final threat. This isn't over, Claire. I'm going to make sure everyone knows what kind of person you really are. They already do, I called back. That's the problem. The security footage from our lobby confrontation somehow found its way to social media. Maris's aggressive behavior, inability to deny the accusations, and attempt to grab my phone painted a clear picture of who the real aggressor was in this situation. Within a week, my attorney called with interesting news. Claire, your sister has hired a lawyer. They're threatening to sue you for defamation, intentional infliction of emotional distress, and something called tortious interference with family relationships. I almost laughed. She's suing me for telling the truth about her behavior. Apparently so. Her lawyer sent a demand letter requesting monetary damages and a public apology. They're also demanding you cease all investigation into their financial affairs. What do you think of their case? Frankly, it's garbage. Everything you've shared is either factual or based on your documented personal experiences. Truth is an absolute defense against defamation. As for emotional distress, they'll have trouble proving it when they orchestrated a public attack against you first. And tortious interference with family relationships isn't a valid cause of action in this context. You can't be sued for exposing criminal behavior just because the criminals happen to be related to you. He paused. However, I think they're trying to intimidate you into backing down. Maris's attorney is probably hoping you'll settle rather than deal with the hassle and expense of litigation. They picked the wrong person to intimidate. File a countersuit. Within 6 weeks, the first dominoes had fallen and my family's world was crumbling. Maris and Henry faced foreclosure, bankruptcy, tax liens, job loss, and CPS oversight. Dad was under investigation for elder abuse and fraud with criminal charges pending. Mom was now in a professional care facility with her finances secure, though she was heartbroken by Dad's betrayal. And me? I was sitting in my vacation cabin with Finn, sipping wine and watching the sunset over the mountains. I'd also started spending time with Luke, a wonderful man I'd met through a hiking group who found my independence attractive rather than threatening. 6 months later, Maris showed up at my door one final time. She looked terrible, gaunt, exhausted, with dark circles under her eyes. Her car was a beat-up Honda I didn't recognize, probably all they could afford after losing their nicer vehicles to repossession. "Claire, please," she whispered as I opened the door. "We need to talk." "I have nothing to say to you." "Wait," she said, putting her hand against the door as I started to close it. "I know you're angry, but my kids don't deserve this. They're going to be homeless." "Your kids are innocent," I agreed, which is why CPS is ensuring they're in a safe environment with parents who can provide for them. The parenting classes are humiliating, and Henry can't find work because of his record. We're losing everything. You already lost everything. You lost it the moment you decided to attack me in front of a room full of people for refusing to give you something that didn't belong to you. It was just words, Claire. People say things when they're stressed. Dad hit me, and you applauded. You stood there and clapped while your father assaulted me because I wouldn't give you something that wasn't yours. She looked down at her feet. I know that was wrong. No, you don't get to minimize this. You planned my public humiliation. You called me a family disappointment. You agreed when Dad called me a barren waste. You cheered when he hit me. And now you want my help because dealing with the consequences is hard? What can I do to make this right? She asked desperately. I considered her question for a long moment. Nothing. There's nothing you can do. You can't take back the words. You can't take back the humiliation. You can't undo the assault. And you can't change the fact that you all showed me exactly who you really are. But we're family. No, I said, cutting her off. Family doesn't treat each other the way you treated me. Family doesn't gang up on each other. Family doesn't physically assault each other. Family doesn't applaud when someone gets hurt. She broke down sobbing on my doorstep. Part of me felt sorry for her, remembering the little sister I'd grown up with before she became entitled and cruel. But most of me remembered standing in that room, hand pressed against my burning cheek, as people celebrated my humiliation. Goodbye, Maris, I said, closing the door. Today I'm writing this from my vacation cabin with Finn asleep at my feet and coffee growing cold beside my laptop. Luke is driving up this weekend and we're going to hike to a waterfall I've been wanting to show him. My life isn't perfect, but it's mine. It's authentic. It's built on genuine relationships with people who value me for who I am, not what I can provide them. The truth is, I didn't destroy my family. They destroyed themselves with their greed, entitlement, and cruelty. I simply stopped enabling them to avoid the consequences of their actions. Sometimes the best revenge isn't getting even. It's removing yourself from the equation and letting people face the natural results of their choices. Sometimes it's building a life so much better than what you had before that you realize the people who hurt you actually did you a favor by showing you who they really were. Sometimes the best revenge is simply living well. And I'm living very well indeed.